Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're here on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below. You can click on that, and it'll take you to another link. You can click on it to get to Zoom. And then in Zoom, you can go to Makana by clicking on another link, and you'll find yourself there, and you can ask questions. You can vote on those questions. You can chat with other folks. So we highly recommend being part of the conversation and asking those questions. Really, this is an entire conversation that's driven by you, the viewer. You're the producers. Now, if you think you can answer the question, then come in a little early. We open the doors at 6 o'clock. We start doing mic checks at 6:40. It's important to be here before the mic check so that we can make sure that you're ready for the show. And we have the first hour is always general discussion, whatever you want to ask about media and virtual production. Second hour is something that we find interesting. So we have a special guest, we have a special subject. And so today I'm really excited. We're going to have Don Komarechka here. He is, he sent, I have it right here. He sent this to me and I was like, I don't understand what this is. And then I put it on and I was amazed, like just stunned. And so I've been thinking, I've got to get Don on here at some point in time. And so Don's going to be here in the second hour talking about how you put these stereo photography together. So stay tuned for that. Tomorrow we're going to talk about acoustics. We talked about detonating things down on the inside of the room. Now we're going to talk about keeping stuff out from the outside of the room. So that'll be Tuesday. Wednesday, 1 year. We've done this for 1 year. 1 year. If anyone knows that reference. We've done a couple of these now, and we're going to talk about it. I will celebrate a little bit on Wednesday. Wednesday is the last day of the, there's the last day of the lunar year, the last day of the, whatever. This is the last day of the office hours year is March 24th. So we have our new calendar that we'll have to start everything from there. So anyways, we'll talk about it on Wednesday. Thursday, we're going to talk about modular synthesizers with Chris Meyer. I apologize ahead of time. I'm pretty sure it's a pretty expensive habit. And some of you might get hooked on the new drug. So anyway, it's really cool. Chris is going to talk about that. Friday, AWS Part 3. The guys have been crushing it. It's just going to be, everyone's going to be. We're going to go. Guy, what is the next subject? What are we talking about on Friday?
So on the last episode, we did inputs. Yeah, so this time we're actually going to use our popular friend Zoom to input from another instance. So we're going to be talking about NDI discovery servers and how to translate from one instance to another via NDI, but we got to do a little trickery to get it to talk to the other one. So it'll be fun.
It's awesome. And then Saturday, of course, Education Roundtable and Resolve. So we'll be doing a roundtable, or the final week with Ripple, talking about Resolve. All right, Bill, let's take it away.
Okay, we're diving in. And our first question this morning comes from Stan Chan in Roseville, California. And he says, anyone try out the YouTube checks system that verifies if your video has potential copyrighted material and might get you a strike? Will it help reduce copyright issues?
I don't think anyone's tried it yet. I haven't had the need to try it yet. And I think it is useful because it does avoid the risk, especially for people who are generating revenue with ad revenue on YouTube. I think it's useful for them because you'll know whether you have parts of before you post it. Here's the challenge is you get it up there. And what a lot of people do is they put it in unlisted, let it sit there and see if there's anything that they did that is going to cause a flag. Which of course would make it hard for them to impossible to monetize until they got rid of it. So being able to do that without so much trouble, I think is a great move forward, but I haven't needed to do it because I don't monetize. I don't care. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I found your method to just unlist it works really, really well. And then, if need be, you make the change and then you re-up it.
But having a more organized way to do that, that's a little less random, is amazing. So I think they're going the right direction with it. I just haven't needed to use it yet, but we should try to test it. We should put something up that will flag, and then something that we know will flag, and then see what it does. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I actually use it. I've been using it. I think I've been beta on this for a while. I actually use it in the opposite level, and that is if somebody has something that they've taken one of my videos and put it up on their board, I can go in and either say you got 7 days to take it down or have them take it down right away. But of course, I've never gotten anything copyright strike on me because I use mostly original material. So I've never had that happen. So
Here you go, Bill.
I don't think they're ever going to do it because I think it'd take too many resources. But boy, wouldn't it be fabulous if not only would it tell you that you may have an issue, but if it hooked up to what entity is claiming the
Oh no, it
thing
does.
that you used. It does?
Yeah, I mean,
so it will link you to
YouTube knows that immediately.
solution.
YouTube, not only will YouTube tell you that you've stepped off the line, it'll tell you who you stepped it off with, and sometimes there's multiple parties. So it might be like these 6 people are claiming that video. So, but it'll also tell you what the in and out points are, and you can click a button and have it just delete it, and it will actually cut at the scene. Like it will, like when you cut to that and when you cut away, it'll just go and it'll be gone. You know,
That's fabulous. Great job, guys.
It is. It's a little weird. We had one where we had a comedian who gave us his own stand up in London or whatever, but the BBC has a claim to it. So he goes, well, here's my and here's a little piece of what I've done, and then it just comes back to him, and he goes, wasn't that great? Because it just surgically removed the one thing that he had referred to. So it's not 100%. Go ahead, Chris.
So is what you're talking about here different than just having music in the background? Because I've done videos before where I didn't turn the radio off, and it just puts an ad in front of my video.
Right. So it can. The creators, creators that put stuff up have a variety of different ways that they can enforce it. One is they can just track it, so that they just get in their back end. They can just see what is happening with their content. That's probably the most common, which is why we don't notice it. Well, probably the most common is demonetization, which is that you can't make money with that video. And sometimes they used to put ads on it. I don't know if they still do that as much anymore, but it used to be that if you put something up and someone claimed it, the video was no longer yours. Like you couldn't delete it, edit it, move it. It was like stuck, in this state. And then of course they can block it, and then finally you can get a strike. So there's different levels of, and it's really from the cool to the completely uncool thing to do. So, so that's kind of the process. It's I think one of the reasons TikTok does really well is they've built a culture around remixing. So, the fact that you actually want people to steal your stuff is a new take on the process. All right. Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila in the Philippines says, I'm loving my ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. I want to get audio from my Dante network into my ATEM with an AVIO 2 channel output adapter connected to the dual female XLR to 3.5 millimeter male TRS cable work.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, ideally you would get a proper balance to unbalance converter that would do impedance matching and also matching of levels. Popular one is the Radial J ISO, and on the more affordable end of things, there's the Art Clean Box Pro, I believe. You can make a cable and just match up the levels, because professional line level that typically comes out of XLR is a lot hotter than consumer line level, which is what the ATEM Mini is expecting. So you would need to drop if you just make a passive cable, you'd need to drop down that level quite a bit. And also, like, you technically will hear a slight difference, especially on the high end, the higher frequencies, because of the impedance mismatch. But with an ATEM Mini's circuitry in terms of audio, I don't know if that would make that big of a difference. You can also, if you don't have the Avio adapter yet, you can also get a Dante enabled headphone amp. I believe Focusrite has a really good one in their RedNet line. There's also the Radial also makes one. Here Technologies and also Glen Sound makes one as well. And that headphone amp is just the basic unbalanced stereo connection, and that can go directly into the ATEM. And Johnny is in Manila, and if you want to look for if you want to get Radial products in Manila, I believe JB Music here carries it.
Another classic Mickey answer. That's great. Go ahead, Guy, and then who wants to follow Mickey?
Mickey knocked it out of the park with that one. But my big question would be, why? I mean, you've got this beautiful, pristine digital audio, and now you're going to suck it back into the analog world through a device that doesn't have as
well.
Good
If you're streaming,
so
you would need it if you're streaming if you have all your audio and you're streaming from the ATEM. I think you would need to get the audio in there. I think that would be the
gotcha.
Yeah, I think
makes
that'd be the
sense.
challenge there. Grant, and then Jason, and then Mickey.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to keep it balanced, and so the two ways of doing it, I think the better approach, rather than going back into that unbalanced way, is even through a camera. If you happen to have a camera with XLR inputs, I think that's got to sound better than doing it through the those other inputs. The other way that I do it is if you buy the Blackmagic 6G HDMI to like SDI to HDMI converters, they still have the analog balanced inputs. And so rather than having an embed, you kind of got to embed it and de-embed it, but it's balanced then. So you'd still use the AVO converter, and then it would be balanced, and then it'd be embedded, and now you've got it in. And that's how my flow is here.
Yeah, good, Jason.
I have a hard time adding to what's already been said. I would say maybe one additional way to do it would be if you're plugging a computer in anywhere in your chain, you can always just use the Dante virtual sound card and output that, into the HDMI that is going in through your computer. Right. Not as ideal, but definitely inexpensive and fast way to do it before you're actually buying hardware.
Yep. Next question.
Jonas Dattel. I'm sorry, James in Dublin. I got the wrong one. In Ireland, I bring Zoom in from one Mac to another and back out using the Blackmagic Designs Ultra Studio Minis. On the return, the image is washed out. Why is this, and how can I correct it?
It sounds like, I don't know why you would get that with the Mini. It sounds like a LUT issue, but that doesn't make any sense. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I wonder if James is coming out of the HDMI out of the Mac or of the computer. I wonder if it's some sort of color space issue in terms of the profile, the image profile.
Yep. Go ahead, Jason.
I'm almost certain that's exactly what it is. Mac OS has this really neat thing where you don't see the option for HDR unless it detects that whatever you're going into is capable of HDR. So my guess is that you're getting raw coming out of the Mac because Blackmagic did their HDR correctly.
Yeah, it could be thinking that it's Blackmagic. It could be thinking that it is capable of HDR, and if it sent HDR to it, it would definitely look washed out. Mickey.
Yeah, the Mac's HDMI output might be set to P3 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you definitely look at it. It's a color mismatch. We're not sure exactly where, but it definitely, that's what you're dealing with. Next question.
Talak Miguel Lopez Waterman, our friend from New York, says, what is the best way to encode or convert an interlace signal to progressive? Hardware, software? I'm using a set of older cameras that only has an interlaced option on the SDI output. It's coming in on a Blackmagic Design deck link at the moment. The conversion is happening further down the chain now.
Go ahead, Stuart.
He says a set of older cameras. So I'm wondering if he's using some older ENG cameras. And I'll come back to that in a second. But you probably find your BMD Decklink software has the option to do the deinterlacing for you. That'd be the first place to look. But for some of those older ENG cameras, see if you can find out where the service menu is and see if you can swap the output to progressive in the camera. That will be your absolute best solution.
And if you're looking for Sony, you're looking for PSF is what you're looking. That's going to be it's going to follow an interlaced chain, but is doubling up the frames across the fields. Go ahead, Bill.
And remember, if you're starting with NTSC interlace, each field is half of the frame, and there's a time differential. So if you have a moving object in it, in the time it takes for the system to scan field 1 and then field 2 and assemble it into a frame, there can be motion. So inexpensive interlace to progressive converters just double the first frame, and you're going to be losing some temporal time resolution if you do that. The better ones, and Blackmagic Design does make some much better ones, try to interpret the differences between those two things and help it a little bit.
I don't think they do anymore.
They don't anymore?
No, so the dirty secret is that they figured out this. Somebody figured out that it was easier to scale fields than it was to actually deinterlace them. So most of the hardware now is dedicated. And I could be wrong. I mean, they could be doing something there, but almost when we started suddenly seeing clean images that are just slightly softer than the real 1080p, it's because what they did is they figured out if we just grab a field, and scale it, you this has been kind of a dirty secret for maybe 15 years. Like there was a whole bunch of deinterlacing stuff and you'll see it all went away, is because they were like, oh, well, because all these TVs had scalers in them because of going from SD to HD and then HD to 4K. So you have the Teranex is one of the best ways to, as a hardware device, it's one of the best ways to go through interlace and deinterlace. But what it's doing, I'm pretty certain what it's doing is taking one of the fields and scaling it up, or both the fields and scaling up, and then you have that temporal information back. But it's dedicated chips that are hardware driven to do that are pretty effective. Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
I learned when I first was accessed to the Teranex, it was originally designed, I think, by the military for satellites. So it learned how to do the amazing, be able to from how many miles up and read a cigarette on a.
Yeah,
so
but in this case, it's not nearly as complicated. It's just make more pixels. It's not doing anything. There's no heavy AI or anything else. It's probably some stochastic scaling. Next question.
Chuck Wojak Jr. of Concord, Massachusetts says, do you think it's possible to build a kit for hybrid small meetings? CPU monitor, camera, speaker to easily follow clubs and societies and meetings to easily transition to hybrid. Wide pickup mic, wide angle lens, affordable suggestions.
Just trying. We're all trying to build it in our heads right now. And there's the little silences there. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just think, I think Alex's original point, which I stand behind firmly, is that the real problem is the mind of the presenter. Are you prioritizing your local group sitting in front of you, or are you prioritizing the audience who's watching remotely? You really literally cannot do both of those things simultaneously. You can switch back and forth agilely between them. But if you're listening to somebody in the room, the viewer on the outside is a little diminished. And if you're paying attention to a presentation to engage the people on the other side of the camera, then the people in the room are being a little bit ignored right now. It's really hard to do two things at once like that. I
have to admit that I'll still do it if someone pays me to put two people in the room together, but I won't do it on my own, like on my own volition. Like I won't because like I'm designing an event for the summer and we're going to literally have everybody at the facility, but they're all going to be in their own boxes. Because we have a handful of people that are coming in remotely, and to keep them all on the same page. And the thing is that because what you get when you do one-to-one, everybody having their own camera, is I have an intimate conversation between two people that the viewer gets to stand in between. And be able to see both directions of that eye to eye and everything else. I think that what we're going to find is when we go back to these group meetings, these social meetings that I'm not answering your question, but you're going to find that more and more people are going to go, ooh, it was better when we were doing it on Zoom. It was actually, I think as when people improve their kit, which this is what we're doing here is a glimpse into the future, because if you did a monthly meeting, it would take you, 30 years or 40 years to get to where we're at now. So I think that that's what happens when people get it working. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then JJ, and then Grant.
I think the bigger problem is needing a person there that knows the technology and being able to educate the other people that are on the panel so they can do it correctly. Because I do the single at home kit right now, and it's tough enough just to educate them where to look at, how to talk, and how to present, how to set up their system as well. So I think that's going to be a very big key for a successful type of setting like this.
Go JJ and then Grant.
Watching groups now that are going or trying to go from the all remote sessions to hybrid, what I've seen is that very often people are going to hybrid because they miss the spaces they were in before. And as they do that, they're doing the hybrid remote or that location where they missed poorly. That is to say, and I don't think there's any way to do it well unless you had a camera and everyone was mic'd And to do that easily, it isn't as easy as sitting down in front of a camera in a rig you've got set up at home. So I think that is another issue. And the intimacy of this, like being able to whisper, the effect of being able to say something, really closely and intentionally bringing up information that is relevant to the conversation, that allows those meetings to be succinct rather than a drawn out, social.
And being able to take a break and walk away from everybody by doing that. Like it is a very powerful tool. Go ahead, Grant, and then Bill.
Yeah, I think when I think about your question, it makes me think 5 years ago of live streaming. It's like, can we do a live streaming, kit that we can roll into a room and we have a camera and a few mics and away we go. So I guess it's almost like it's the wrong place to ask this question, because we're really pushing the envelope on what hybrid means. And so I would, to answer the question, I'd say no. I think let's try to keep pushing people into either totally virtual, like digital first, right? Well, and to create live experiences that are exclusive. And then I'd also just note about you saying about a wide pickup mic. Not ideal, right? We want to try to get really close miking, not a wide mic. But.
Yeah, I'm making all of this up. So I've been talking about this like separation. It's not like there hasn't been a study at Stanford about it yet. So we don't know if it's actually true.
We're all peers here. So isn't that peer reviewed?
Yeah, it's peer reviewed. Is that when I try to separate things out for folks, I'm really trying to separate them into, I think, about 4 different things, which is that you have the in room. You have people that there's no cameras, they're just having a conversation. And I think that's still very valuable. You have the virtual, a completely virtual event, which is this is a completely virtual event. There is no physical place for it other than where we're sitting. Then you have your hybrid event, which is the live speaker, live audience, but then there's an online audience watching. And then you have the digital first event, which is that the speakers and the crew and the audience can be in all different places, but they're not, the speakers and the audience are not in the same place. The speakers are in a studio, speakers are in studios, but it can be many studios. It can be their house. And then the viewers can be on their phone. It can be another audience. It can be 1,000 people in New York, watching. So there's still all the stuff, a lot of what we wanted, which was, because we remember once it's over 500 people, you're watching a screen anyway. So, so the thing is but everybody, by digital first, it means that everybody is has first person status, like they get talked to directly. As soon as you put an audience in the room, that everybody's at second tier. Everybody not in the room is at second tier. And there is no way, like we did a cooking show with Sky over yesterday. Everybody got left out because there were 2 people talking to each other cooking, but and I didn't notice that. I thought, like, literally this was a lesson for me watching that was how this would be more engaging, I think, if the 2 cooks, like, I don't know what Sky and Madeline will do. I know that after watching that, I will never put 2 cooks in a room together. I will always have them come in from 2 separate kitchens. And it was the most important thing I got out of that, working on that with Sky. I got lots out of it. It was a really enjoyable thing to work on. I know it doesn't sound like it when I was yelling at the beginning to our crew, but it was very enjoyable. And I learned a lot about things that I want to do. But one of the things that I was blown away by was that 2 speakers in the same place made me feel left out. Like, I was just like, wow, that is intense, and it really changed a lot of thinking over the weekend. I've been thinking about it all weekend. Sky and then Bill.
Well, and on the set, I was realizing I was cutting like a basketball game. And when the topic of the celery, the beans, the thing, and I'm trying to do quick cuts on the B-roll as if it were a soccer game, and trying to follow the ball. And so that we mashed up 2 things that maybe shouldn't have been.
We get to learn.
We do learn, and to put a basket or to put a sport theme on top of a cooking. But again, it's not a cooking show. I got to keep understanding it's entertainment.
Yep.
Now,
And to circle back, because I don't want to leave Chuck without an answer. No
Sorry about
answer,
that.
no question left behind. I'm just going to circle back and we'll close it up. A C930 and a SM58 is what we've used in the past for exactly what you're asking about. You don't want a wide area mic. You want something that someone can switch on and switch off and talk straight into when they want to talk to the online audience. And the C930 has a 90-degree field of view, and so one or two of those would take you. And that's what we've used all over the world for when we want to bring classrooms in to stuff. Guy and Bill, real quick though, because we're going to move on.
Yeah, in this scenario, I would think that one of the least expensive items is a Facebook Portal Plus because it has the camera that actually tracks you, so it can zoom in a little bit because it's a 4K sensor. The only downside is that it's got a poor microphone. So I picked up this idea from some teachers, which is to get a touring guide system, which is a speaker and a wireless mic. And these can be had for less than $100. So you take that speaker and you put it by the portal, and now you could pick up intelligible audio even from 20, 30 feet away, and you're still in it for less than $500. So that's one option.
Good, Bill.
For me, the biggest problem, because I did this for many years, I used to record meetings of the National Speakers Association, and we had large groups gathered, and we were trying to make that an event we could record and then broadcast later. The problem was always 100% of the time audio quality, because it never got up to my expectations, because you get into these moments of interchange between the audience and the person doing the presentation. The presenter sounds great. The audience always, no matter what array of microphones or process we used, either was distant and sounded different than the speaker, or, as would easily happen, you broke up things to pass around a mic, and you just slowed up the entire presentation while somebody ran a mic out to the next speaker. And we did both. Always the hardest part of my edit was getting the audio to a standard I thought was professional.
And the final thing I'll just say is that we're going to go through a phase of hybrid, but it is really a phase. Like, hybrids will not work ever. And we're going to, and the pain of them will slowly build up, because we will keep on doing shows like this, and more people will do, and more and more people will do shows like this that are separated out and aren't hybrid. And the folly of hybrid will become more and more apparent to people as it happens, because they're going to keep on getting great experiences. And, as production values keep on going up, and the hybrid will not get any better. Because it can't. It's impossible. It's physics. Next question.
Jonas Dattel comes up next from Reutlingen, Germany. Alex, are you thinking of adding the Agora.io to Mukana to have audio-only chats in Mukana? They claim to have 3D spatial audio.
I am researching it. So we're definitely looking into it for some of the next steps. I realized, I was researching their platform, and I was like, I'm using Clubhouse to use Clubhouse, but I could just use this and build what Clubhouse does relatively easily, and then not have to use Clubhouse, because I find Clubhouse to be obtuse. So it's fine. It's just a really painful platform. It might succeed, but wow, if they don't fix it pretty quickly, it's just hard to listen to the conversations. Next question.
Larry Engelhardt of Chicago says, why is Blackmagic spending so much money advertising their free Resolve editor?
Hey, go ahead, Bill. And then
market share. They want to get as many Resolve people started as possible, in the hopes that, like what happened with Final Cut in the original days when Avid was expensive and Final Cut was far less expensive, a lot of editors migrated there. So I think they're planning on the same thing happening.
Roscoe and then Stuart.
Bill stole my answer. He's absolutely correct. And I just point out that they do sell a $30,000 dongle to Resolve. Blackmagic Design does.
Stuart.
It's actually the gateway drug version of marketing. You get somebody hooked on the product that's free, and then transition them onto the full one that you make money on. Yeah. And it's done by everybody.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, for me, it was the fact that I used Resolve, downloaded for free, and then I bought 4 cameras.
Yeah. It's Blackmagic's playing such a huge game that everyone else is going to have a heart. Like every other part, it's insane. Like how deep this is. The vertical level makes Krupp's arms look like a walk in the park. Sky, and then Jason.
Well, coming from the Avid world, that was a $35,000 buy-in to begin with. Then when Final Cut came in at $1,000, the accountants forced the issue on us editors that were using the tool. fortunately, Final Cut 7 had the ability to play well with others in a collaborative system. Like Resolve also has that professional skill level as well as the simple version. So it's a yes and it's free.
And yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Blackmagic is trying to do for professional audiovisual production what Apple did with the iPhone or with the Mac Mini. It's that simple.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's just basically the door into the Blackmagic infrastructure, into their walled garden. We talked about it last hour with Final Cut Pro, and why Final Cut Pro won't go to a Windows version, because they want you to end up buying a Mac. They want you to end up in the infrastructure, continue to buy it. And the same thing with Blackmagic. They want you to buy the cameras. They want you to buy the gear. So you're in the infrastructure, and within Resolve, you have those options to hook up your 6K. You have your options to hook up your mini, and with the mini ISO, you just bring one file over and it's all switched.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I wonder if there's something that NVIDIA could do that's similar in order to get people in, get some more people into their walled garden, whatever that is.
I don't think there's anything that anyone can do to compete in this market with Blackmagic, and the reason for that is that you have to have all these things be mature. It's the same problem that computer companies have with Apple with the M1, is that unless you own the software and the chip design and the hardware and all, and the app store and all of those things, it gets really hard to compete with what they're doing. And so what Blackmagic has been able to do is slowly, when we've watched them do it over the last decade, is slowly piece together all these sections by buying up things that basically weren't working. Teranexes and all these things were great technology that didn't have a good business model. And so all they did was add business model, and then now they're at a size where they're not adding the business model, they're adding a network effect. When you take anything that they take that fits into their puzzle and they add it to it, it automatically becomes successful because it's connected to all those things. So it's a really powerful, like if my whole thing is they sold, I don't know how many switchers they sold, but I bet you it was a lot. Once you buy the switcher, to me, every time someone says, I bought this switcher and now I'm going to use a different HDMI camera, I'm always like, why would you do that? It's completely outside of my norm, because you can now shade the camera and you can control it and you can do all the things you want to do with it. And it ties so nicely into everything else.
Well, maybe the next couple of models that Blackmagic could introduce are a post-production app store and post-production services, including cloud services that other people can do on some kind of platform that they do.
It'll be interesting. I think that they, I think they're getting to the point where they don't need anybody else. They're not quite there yet, but they're on their way to not really needing anything else other than what they're doing. Next question.
Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois says, can Sky do a rundown of his outdoor mat on the patio? Seems like a lot was going on with this production, or maybe a second hour.
So we did talk about it on Sunday. And
it was amazing
for 2 hours.
Amazing yesterday.
So
thank you.
And if you missed it, don't worry. Well, we're not putting it up, but what's going to happen is we're going to start doing more of these as a group. And we should, for Chad, we should figure out where we're going to put that in the Discord or whatever of how we talk about it. But then you can ask questions. Yeah.
Call it the show.
We're kind of adopting the show. So anyway, my plan though is that if all goes well, what we're going to do is we'll start doing. I think they're going to be every other week or every every month or whatever. We're going to start engaging more people that want to play to be part of the event, so that we can learn. And the things that we're learning are, how do you make a show work like this? How do you build a remote show where the entire production group is remote? Or not all of it, but most of it is all somewhere else. How do we manage comms, and how do we manage production, and how do we manage all the graphics, and we're going to keep on trying to figure that out as a group. So we're using the hardest thing when you're doing technical stuff a lot of times is actually finding someone to make the content, something to happen in front of the cameras while you're trying to figure all this other stuff out. Doing both of those is a pain.
Well,
so anyway,
the one ask is, does anybody have a spare kitchen we can borrow for 6 months? Well, we can completely destroy Madeline's marriage, which she finally got back after 34 years. I'd prefer to keep that and maybe find another kitchen in the Bellevue area of this northeast Seattle region.
So someone who's ready to be a research.
We need an R&D, and I'm thinking we don't need a set. I mean, sorry, we don't need a sound stage. I think we need somebody's house that would allow us to just turn it into a set. So good internet, good electricity, and we'll be nice and we'll feed you really good food.
Yeah. So anyway, if we can figure that out, we're going to start doing it more often. And then what we'll do is we're all going to keep on doing the Sunday mornings after those events will become, we'll do Q&A, and then second hour or two will be us kind of breaking it down. And I'm not really ready to break it down on YouTube or distribute the records. So Sunday mornings after those events will be a day to come.
To Keenan's question, nobody died. I have a low barrier to entry. Nobody died. It rained from minute one. Alex said 3, 2, 1, and it went live. It was awesome. We had 3 cameras. Again, how do you not do things? We learned a lot of ways how to not do things. But again, the gratitude that I have, Alex 4D, your graphics are stunning. Guy, for the loan of your equipment. JJ is the ultimate fungineer. And so this team continues to grow. Andy, and names. So thank you. And we're going to be continuing to have fun and delicious entertainment.
There we go. All right. Next question.
Moving on, Daniel Goldstein is up next from Washington, D.C. Lots of us have bags for gear that are made of stiff synthetic fabric. Are there any recommendations for adding large labels to the sides of these bags? Something better than super glue?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Learn to sew. And it's not as silly as you might think. My father is over 80 and last week started doing leather work to do sewing on leather for seats in cars. This is the same sort of techniques. And if you get it right, you will be able to fix your own socks, make repairs to everything, and it is a useful skill to have.
Now, when you have as many bags as I have, it's find a seamstress. is the way. We had just too many of them to do that, but we had people sew them onto the bottom of them, and they worked really well. But same idea. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. No, Stuart's answer was pretty much perfect. Get a big thimble and get a heavier needle than you think you would use for, sewing a button on. And then just use YouTube. Sewing is pretty easy, and I found it to be very helpful in cases like this.
And therapeutic.
Go ahead, Bill.
And rather than trying to sew your name on it, just get a luggage tag with a nice big clear angle window in it, and then tack sew the 4 corners of it onto your bag. That way you can slip a new card in if your bag changes or something like that, and it'll last forever.
All right, next question.
Craig K. of Toronto says, with the news that the Oscars won't have anyone coming in over Zoom, but will prefer to have people in a dedicated remote location because they wanted something more formal than sweatshirts for guests. Is this just the world catching up with Alex's comment about swim shorts and flip-flops?
Well, I think that you find that one of the issues is that it's complicated to do it well, and I think they just finally gave up on trying to figure that out. So go ahead, Stuart.
The Oscars, the way they brand themselves, that is the premium awards ceremony every year. They expect to be at the better quality than everyone else, and they will simply have looked at what everyone else has done and said, this isn't good enough. We've got to do better. We've got to be the one that everybody looks at and goes, that was amazing.
Jason?
Yeah, this is old Hollywood posturing and turning their nose up at it and then realizing they can't do it. It's not about the sweatshirts and the flip-flops. It's about the fact that they don't know how to do anything that isn't, a drop studio. So to that end, that's, the dig is a misdirect. We'll leave it at that.
Go ahead, Alex.
They want to be the Eurovision Song Contest of award ceremonies.
Yeah, there you go. All right, next question. Let's keep going.
Gus Libby of Satellite Beach, Florida says, Alex, we know you love photogrammetry. How would a newbie get started to learn about it?
Well, I mean, right now, what I'd say is that capturing reality is something I would pay a lot of attention to. I don't have as much experience with it, and we're gonna all try to learn it together, I think, sometime soon. I'm waiting to see when this was bought by Epic, so I'm kind of waiting to see when capture in reality becomes free, so or some version of it becomes free, because that's typically Epic's MO. And so I think that that's a pretty good one. I mean, for me, Metashape is a little easier, and I'm going to be posting some videos soon about how to do it in Metashape, just because I might as well get those videos out before I move over to capture in reality, just because I know how to do it. And so you can download Metashape for free. You just can't save. And I would recommend doing it. It's a little easier as far as just turning it on and making it go. And I'll try to do that video sooner than later and put it up. But it is you literally just go out and take lots of photos. The best, when I was doing texture maps, I was talking to a guy named Paul Houston, and we'll try to get Paul on sometime. But anyway, I asked Paul, how do I take good texture maps? He goes, take a lot of film. This is back in the day. Take a lot of film, take a lot of pictures. And it turns out photogrammetry is very much like that. The way you get good at it is to do it all the time. Like, you just, you'll see me take like 80 photos of something. That's me. I wonder how this will turn out. And then I just take it home and I throw it into a hopper, and I let it cook, because you just throw everything in. You can do a lot of extra work to it, but you literally just throw it in and say go, and it'll just create what it can do with it, at least to get started. And you'll get to see what works and doesn't work. I think that there's a lot of tools that will be coming related to that. I think that the real power that we're going to see with the iPhone is when developers start to incorporate what we haven't really seen. We see it in AEC, in engineering. AEC uses this, but the mixture of LiDAR, structured light, and photographs, unstructured light, together is really explosive. But we just don't see it very often, because not a lot of people have done it. So what you want is an iPhone app that is capturing the distance from an object, and while it's taking photos. So as you move around it, it's taking photos when it realizes you've moved far enough around that it gets what it needs. And it just keeps taking those photos. And then it uses that structured surface to then inform the photogrammetry. And what you'll end up with is incredibly precise geometry with great texture maps. And we just haven't, no one's, it's not, I make it sound like it's easy. It's not. And obviously, because if it was, someone would have done it already. But that's what I think is coming. And then when we get to that, and you combine it with USDZ, which is what Apple's, first Pixar and then Apple's file format, what you're talking about is being able to take a photo of something, and a minute later or a couple minutes later, throw it into motion and animate it, or put it into a Keynote doc, or text it to somebody. And it's a perfectly accurate model of that object. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I will say that we've tried this when I worked at a subsea company, and it was great for concept, but the stuff that we ran the phone around or ran the cameras around and we tried to use in the actual CAD program, the precision wasn't there.
Right. That's the mixture of the LiDAR and the photogrammetry is where things go crazy.
Yeah, we had LiDAR hooked up to it. Now, we worked with a lot of LiDAR data, but we still, in the end, it would give us a nice envelope, but we still had to hard model that.
And I'm not saying you won't. So to build a clean model, you're still going to have to rebuild the topology of that model. So I'm not saying this replaces building those, but you could do a lot that looks really, really good. And again, the LiDAR mixed with the photogrammetry. The LiDAR will give the photogrammetry the accuracy that you were missing, and the photogrammetry will give you the detail that the LiDAR can't generate currently.
Yeah, the thing that was great for us is it did a majority of the heavy lifting. So instead of me having to drive out to a site and spend 2 days measuring a rig, I could just bring it into the CAD and lay all the structure on top of it. And then a couple, what they would call their important dimensions, and then everything else builds in.
Yep. Well, and that's the whole, the LiDAR and the photogrammetry. Again, I scan a lot. We scan things all the time, and we scan them, and then someone builds a model in SketchUp or builds a model in, something else. But you get the accuracy, and then you get it clean, and then you can use it. But it saves you so much time over measuring it. Jesse Schwartz built our server room. Like I scanned it, and then Jesse just went in and boom, it was very quickly built a very, very accurate model of that without, but it was a lot easier than us sending him like 1,000 measurements of that. Next question.
Moving on, it comes from Mickey in the Philippines and in one of the boxes on your gallery right now. And he says, Alex, for events wherein you have contributors on site but physically separated, would you be using an Interatron-like setup? And if so, what image would you show each contributor? A multi-view or something else?
So what we've done in the past is just show the last person talking. Although now that I've used Zoom so much, I'd be tempted to put and we've definitely done exactly what I'm talking about. We used to do, we did one, there was a show called The Face, I think. It's like a modeling show or whatever. And we were all in the Google New York office with 5 models, or 4 models and a host. And we put each one of them in a different conference room. And I'll see if I can find photos of it, but they all had different colors behind them. And what they were seeing through there, and that all of them had a teleprompter. And what they were seeing through that teleprompter was just the last person that was speaking. But you could split it up. Once you start, here's the other advantage of all of that, is a person sitting there talking, and you can mix all kinds of stuff. We would, like a lot of times we ran a switcher into the teleprompter specifically so that we could put messages right over top of the video. So they're just looking and we're like, hey, you've got something, you got a stray hair, or you've got this, or you've got that, or notes, or, switch over to a teleprompter so they could talk for a second, then let them go back to what they were doing. And they're able to maintain, especially when they get good at it, they're able to maintain eye contact with everybody without having to look away, look down, look up, all the things that you see. I mean, once you actually critically watch stage events and watch like how much of the time they're looking at the DSMs, I mean, the downstream monitors, they're reading like this all the time. Like they're just reading their thing. When you start staring through the facade of these idiotic events that we've been doing for the last 20 years, I got to watch 1,000 of them. So after a while, you just realize this is so stupid. Anyway, Nikki.
So I guess like with that sort of setup, you're creating like an individual like monitor mix, but for images, like a separate monitor engineer just for
whatever
that.
they want.
Wow.
You split it up. What you want is a super source. I mean, that's why I wish I had. What I really want is the next level of switcher is like a hardware thing that will just create 8 super sources at very low latency. Would be amazing. That you just build out these super sources that were designed. The problem is all the super source stuff that isn't in the hardware and isn't in the switcher adds a lot of latency. It adds 3 to 5 frames of latency as it, all the software ones will add latency to it. And so what we don't have is hardware like FPGA level, except for in the ATEMs. And so I have thought about buying a whole bunch of 2MEs, like just stacks of 2MEs so that I can return these complex systems. Anyway, go ahead, Roscoe.
In a close-up, we're very aware of where people's eyes are. I mean, we track eyes extremely well. So to put anything up other than a single head will be distracting if the goal is eye contact.
Yeah, I mean, you have to put it up and place it where you put that right over top of it. But remember, that person's not on air all the time either. So when they're talking to that person that's right in front of them, but they may be looking at some data that's nearby. It's still much better than the other options, which is looking down. Alex?
First, it's a bit like the person running the visual monitor mix. Like it's a monitor mix, but it's visual. They effectively are doing a bit of editorial control. They're saying, get ready for this next question, because I'm now showing the person that maybe you might want to comment on, or something else, or maybe it's just some text that you want this contributor to be able to see. So you actually have to, it's maybe a producer model of dealing with a producer who's working out what the monitor mix minus is visually for various people.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of things that we've done some experimentation with tracking the eyes and making decisions about where the eyes are. So what I really want is when I look down like this, I want it automatically just to switch to, whatever I'm talking about, in that scene. And so that's a whole nother level of it, is using the eyes to actually switch what's in front of you.
But I suppose if you do have co-stars in your movie, it would be nice if on the screen you could see what the other 2 co-stars were looking at while the interviewer was interviewing.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can do it.
So you do arrangements based on sofas.
Absolutely. And to Roscoe's point, you can't move very much, and you probably would see it, but it's still a lot less than this, which is what we're seeing on stage right now for corporate events. Not theater, not movies, but like these corporate events, there's so much eye contact mess that is going on right now. I think that it's a huge improvement. Next question.
Comes from Vincent Alvarez of Bellingham, Washington. It says, I spent the weekend going through my old magazines, E-Week, which had Spencer F. Cat and so forth, AV Video, which I used to read tips for clips in, and Photoshop User. Now I have office hours for my tech info and entertainment. What did you use for tech info pre-office hours?
It's a big question. We're not able to get to all of it because we're running out of time, but let's go, Jason, real quick.
Well, I'm sure that most of us used YouTube and podcasts, but at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I personally still read a whole heck of a lot. I use audiobooks a ton, and for longer articles, I just convert them into speech and then listen to them at 1.5 or 2x.
Yeah, JJ.
Slash.org. I still read it. It's been around for forever.
For me, it's I have to admit that most of it is this show. Well, this show now, but before that, it was probably techmeme.com and Twitter. Those are probably the two places that I get most of my information. Bill, real quick.
I wrote for Video Maker magazine for about a decade, doing an article every month. And it was interesting. It helped me more than I hope we help people, but it was very much about doing simplifying complicated things. And I just think it's a great thing to be able to write and read as much as you can from all the sources. But it's
Next question.
Andy Dolph said, from Durham, North Carolina, or New Hampshire, I'm sorry. The panel talks a lot about Blackmagic Design's 6K pocket cinema cameras for what amounts to studio use. Why not the Blackmagic Design studio cameras?
A Super 35 chip. Now go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I have and used both. The reason is that most people want to be able to use it outside of the studio. This right now is one of those, and it's fantastic. So no, nothing against them. It's just an older product.
Chris?
Yeah, I had a bunch of EF lenses laying around, so it just made sense.
Yeah, and the Super 35 has got much better low light performance and shorter depth of field, so it makes it makes your studio actually look a lot bigger than we use a lot of URSAs in studios, but it definitely makes the studio feel bigger when you have the shorter depth of field. Next question.
Comes from Ronnie Holze of Tromsø, Norway. Conference table in boardroom is the situation. 1 or 2 Insta360 X2 and webcam mode into a OBS, Ecamm, Wirecast, or similar. How to automate camera field of view by audio only. Script, but what mic system to select the correct angle based on the open mic from a Dugan auto mix of some type.
Who is doing the, we were talking about this. Someone's doing auto switching based on video position, but I don't remember. Jeffrey, real quick, we got to move.
I know
quickly.
I know vMix has a program where you have the mic set up, so if a person talks in a specific mic, it will turn the camera to them. But I don't know how to do that with the Insta360.
There is a company that makes a 360, and I haven't used it for so long, I can't think of it, that you could basically have a 360 degree. We used to do it with Ozos, and you could just select a bunch of frames out of it, and each one of those became a camera into our switcher that was kind of wide angle, but you would basically build it, build all the different camera angles out of that 360, but they come in as 16:9 cameras to the switcher. And then again, there's some software, but I don't think we have an answer for that one. I haven't done something we thought about a lot 4 years ago and then stopped using it. The real problem with the 360 stuff is that the depth of field is really deep. Next question.
Ken Jones of Seattle says, recently on our Discord channel, I can't see the offline users like I used to. By the way, what does offline mean as opposed to away?
I don't know. I did notice that today or yesterday that I couldn't see them, and I don't know why that happened. Roscoe?
I believe when you get to 1,000 users, there's a certain number you hit, then they hide them.
Okay. There you go. Let's go on to the next question. We're running out of time.
Okay, Brian Carpenter of Cleveland says, battling video lag for Zoom calls with my DSLR as a webcam. DSLR doesn't have an external mic jack. OBS is already being used to flip a display to a teleprompter, so I don't think I can use OBS to sync. Any ideas for somebody with only PC hardware and an AT2020 mic that has USB? I
think a lot of your lag is most likely OBS. Go Jeffrey and then Jason, real quick.
I agree. You don't need OBS at all. You should be able to just if you use the USB on the camera, you'd be able to go straight to Zoom from there, and then the audio source you can choose whatever.
Depending on the hardware, you might end up with a 4:3 or 2:3 image. That's the only problem with the direct outs from a lot of these cameras. Jason?
Yeah, we feel your pain, Brian. That's one of the reasons we have office hours. There's no great solution to this. Anytime you're using a DSLR as a webcam, you are at the mercy of however it's being encoded. If that's the issue, good luck fixing it. If that, if OBS is the issue, then get rid of it.
You may find that having a direct link to like a mini recorder, like the Blackmagic mini recorder, will be lower latency and then not getting rid of OBS and just going straight into Zoom will probably lower the latency. But OBS is part of it. And again, you could go as far as buying an A10 mini and putting your camera into that, because that'll be a lower latency than OBS. Mickey?
Yeah, I think Brian is only using OBS to flip a display for a teleprompter view. To line up, if you just have to delay your microphone to line up with picture, voice meter, potato, banana,
right,
pumpkin, whatever, vegetable or fruit.
Next question.
Tim McCulloch of Wichita, Kansas says, what makes a super source super?
Go ahead, Jason, real quick.
Super source is the source made out of sources. So a super category is the one up of a category. That's why.
You can put up to 4 sources over top of a graphic or underneath a graphic. And so instead of being a DVE, which is just one of those sources, you got a bunch of them, and the ability to add either motion or still graphics. Next question.
Chris Fritchie of Conroe, Texas, and here on the panel says, what's your 1-minute brainstorm of how you'd set up a video showing a how-to for 2 salespeople explaining an item? Would you have those 2 persons in a separate location or just separate areas? This is based on your comment about Sky's video.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Look at the Frame.io demo that we did.
Well, that's for definitely passing 2 things back and forth. And definitely I would have a person that's going to be touching the item. If it's an actual item, I would have one person touching it and one person talking about it. And then you can actually hear that person talking while the other person is doing it. You could even do, again, you could get into something where you take it as far as something like, look at this, this is over here, and this is, this is here, and this looks down here. And so, although generally, if I'm talking about, if I'm trying to do something that's efficient, like you're building a video, I wouldn't use 2 people generally. The only time I would use 2 people is in a live event, because you're discussing it and you're answering questions. I would always use one person if I'm doing a video, because I want to send the information to the person, the receiver, as fast as possible. You can have the input of 2 or 5 or 10 people, but have one person talk about it and get to the point and get it done. Next question.
Rubén Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan says, Don, what is your take on why manufacturers stopped making 3D TV? By the way, waiting patiently for my book. Is there a solution for not wearing glasses? Remember the red cell phone.
Don?
Yeah, well, number one, the book is currently being proofed. So I have that right now, my upcoming macro photography book. If anybody wants to take a look at it, well, you can come to my basement and flip through. But the TV scenario, I don't wear glasses. And so my eyes would get really sore wearing glasses the entire time. You would have to have a fairly narrow band where it looked really, really good, and anybody sitting too far off wouldn't have the same experience for you. And well, it felt like there were too many barriers to entry. If that technology had progressed to the point where you would have no glasses required technology, like the red hydrogen smartphone, which I know Alex has one that you might occasionally still use to take some stereo photos. I know I do. Mm-hmm. That was great, but not great enough to be generally ubiquitous. And I think that we need to cross that threshold of ubiquity to say, okay, well, if there's 3D content, you just see it in 3D. If it's 2D content, well, there's no compromise to the 2D display. And we never really got to that point before people got tired of it, at least with that iteration of technology.
And 3D kept on going. It's called VR. so that all the stuff we learned how to do, we're still doing. We just do it in VR as opposed to 3D. As far as the TVs go. Next question.
Marty Adius, our friend occasionally on the panel from Silver Springs, Maryland, says, I love the idea of Blackmagic's ecosystem, but where are their pan tilt zoom cameras?
I feel like the pressure, especially with the new Canon camera that came out last week, is getting heavier. Like it really, the new Canon has me drooling. Like I definitely want $5,000 and a log output on a 1-inch chip. I was like, oh, I really want that. Go ahead, Roscoe.
There's B4 lens support coming out of the breakouts. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that you can use for a very high-end PTZ system.
Yeah, it's just that a lot of us want an all-in-one PTZ from Blackmagic that would tie into everything else we're doing. It's just frustrating. And I feel like they must know how many they would sell if they did that. I think that it's just not cool enough, and Grant wants to keep on working on film cameras. Next question.
Yeah, it's the last one we have today. It's Paul Wallace, and it's a pretty big question. And I know we're here at the end. Discuss the brilliant opening sequence of the Matthew McConaughey hosted Weird Texas virtual concert to help Texans impacted by winter storms. And he says Q Fenwick, and then he's got a link there, but that's a pretty big topic for
we're out of time. Ask it again, Paul, tomorrow. We literally got down to that one. That one's too deep. I don't think a lot of us have seen it. So sorry. I know that you answered it right at the last. Yeah, it just didn't get a lot of traction because we just haven't seen the video. So we're now switching gears and shifting to stereographic. Is it stereographic photography, or is it's
stereoscopic?
Stereoscopic. So I was actually on a show with Don Komarechka, and is it Komarechka? Komarechka.
Close enough.
Yeah. I was on, and then again, what was it? I just put it down. He sent me this 3D thing. I was like, what is this? So can you describe this, Don?
So, Alex, that is an antique stereoscope. The one that I sent you is probably circa 1901 or 1903. You could buy these at yard sales. You can buy them on eBay for 40 or 50 bucks to get one complete like you've got there. I've got a whole collection of them. I buy them in auctions and lots. Most people don't care about them. And I started making my own images for these. And you can get the old stereo slides that kind of drop in. Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of thing that photographically, nobody really understands. You look like a total dork right now, Alex, and that's okay. You're allowed because the end result is fantastic. You get to see something in stereoscopic 3D imagery, and by the way, you're probably looking at it upside down. I can see the label on the back is upside down. So
it probably is.
Pointing
it looks
that
great
out.
Either way. It looks great. It looks great both ways.
But and I have one too. The thing about this technology, and I kind of want to go right back to the inception of stereo when you look at things like this.
It's twice as good right side up. It's you're right. It's
okay. But the idea is that at least the one that I have is from 1867, and this dates back to the origins of photography. In fact, it predates photography. People were drawing in 3D before we actually had photographic technology at play. And these things, they predate television, obviously, but also radio. And back at the time that it might have been an aristocratic type of thing to have one of these devices, but it soon became mainstream. And if you wanted to explore the world outside of your town or village before mass transportation was even available, it was one of the only options. So back in that history moment, it was powerful, it was useful, and it had resurgences in different waves. As we mentioned, we had the 3D television surge. We had in the 1950s, there was a huge wave of interest in 3D technology, and it kind of comes in those waves as they go. But I mean, looking through these things, I loved it. This to me was the Renaissance version of a Viewmaster. And so I got thinking, how do you actually create content for these things? And whether or not that content is relevant using a 150-year-old stereoscope or using whatever the next generation of no glasses required 3D display is going to be, is immaterial to the content you're creating, right? The vessel for which it is going to be consumed is always going to be in flux. But how do you create it? And I think that's where I kind of want to dig into. I don't know how many people are watching this. I don't know how many people have anaglyph glasses just kind of sitting on their desk like I do, because that's what I do. Or to have like a Google Cardboard or other like super cheap VR headset to just throw your phone in. There's no consistency with this right now. So I figured, well, let's just throw some images up. Let's kind of get an idea of how this thing might progress to new ideas and concepts for us all to explore.
I just realized we could totally do office hours with anaglyph glasses. Why didn't I think of that before oh my gosh. or not anaglyph glasses. I mean the red blue would totally work over Zoom.
It would work over Zoom, and so the idea here is, Alex, I can't pump pipe my screen back into.
Mickey can. Mickey can give you
if I can
access.
Do that.
Screen share
that would be lovely. There we are. So again, I throw up an anaglyph image just because if anybody does have those glasses handy, well, there's your Easter egg. But I don't expect many people to. But I want to describe how you can get into some of this stuff super easy. This, well, it kind of looks intimidating because I'm going to make a passion
Wait,
flower
I don't think I
fluoresce.
see it yet. Are you? Have you shared it yet? Or are you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm seeing his content.
So
Oh, I have two screens. Never mind. Sorry.
It's absolutely gorgeous. The image was great in 3D. Because yes, some of us do have the glasses, and some of us do have a 3D camera at hand.
Oh, awesome. I'm preaching to the choir there. But you'll barely notice on the bottom of this frame that the camera's mounted on a focusing rail, just at the very bottom edge, but it's mounted horizontally so that the camera can move left and right. And there's a lot of really easy ways for you to do this. So if I were to take this photograph of this passion flower, in ultraviolet fluorescence, which is on its own just a brilliant, fun thing to do. But what if I move the camera from one position to another position and I can get a set of images? Now, this one, I figured if anybody has two functional eyes, you might be able to make this work by crossing them because the left image is on the right side and the right image is on the left side. So if you can cross your eyes, and if you're on a big display, you might have to move further away so that you see three images. The one in the middle will jump out at you in 3D if you can lock in on the middle one. Not everybody can do this, okay? About 50% of the population can figure this out, and of that can, you might not get it right away. But if you can, this is one of the classic methods of glassless free, no glasses, no equipment required 3D technology. This reminds me of those magic eye posters, which I could never get by defocusing my eyes into the distance. I always got them inverted by crossing my eyes, and that worked. But it was as simple as a regular camera, a regular lens, no fancy equipment. You just stick the thing on a focusing rail. Now, that's if you're locked down on a tripod. I do a lot of macro photography, and I have a lot of lenses that regular photography lenses can work perfectly fine for this kind of content. It's nothing special, and I've got a lot of them. And anything that you use in macro photography or any type of photography, you can use just a shift left or right. These are all single optic lenses. Well, I mean, multiple optics in the path, but only one light path to create this. And that allows you to create images that look like this, and we're going to get into the true meaning of what stereo is about. It's not just looking at a pair of images here, and if you can cross your eyes, great. If not, well, look at just one. But the idea is how you compose within 3D. And I'm sure a lot of people that have gone to the cinema and opted for the 3D version of a movie get, spears thrown at them and lots of gimmicky effects that don't really connect to the viewer, because if it's not composed in 3D to begin with, then it really falls short. And for static subjects, you can easily move your camera left and right, and you can take these stereoscopic image pairs. And this is one of my favorites because if you look at just a single image of frost growing on an orchid, because who doesn't do that in their spare time? It's just chaos. It doesn't connect to you in any meaningful way. But if you were to see this as a stereoscopic 3D image pair, all of the structure and definition and depth is properly defined. You cannot think of this entire process in 2 dimensions. You have to understand how that third dimension relates to how you're composing things, even if while you're doing it, you're not seeing the effect properly. It takes a lot of effort, or at least some mental training to figure out that process. There are a few ways around that, however. You can buy purpose-built stereo 3D lenses. Now, I've got a bunch of these things. The ones near the top of the frame, they're made from a company in the Netherlands that they don't make them anymore, but I keep bugging the guy to make new ones of the Weiss 3D. Maybe look that guy up and bug him for me, because I really want more of these lenses to exist. I've bought every one that shows up on eBay over the last 2 years. But you can even get something as simple as the Panasonic made a Lumix 3D lens, which brings about part of the problem with some of this technology. Because, if you take a look at, and I've got that lens, I've got it right here. The lenses are so close together. And this was made for a regular sized stereo type of effect. The lenses are so close that you have no stereo effect when you're trying to take pictures of people. And Stuart is holding up a camera. I think was that the W1 or W3, Stuart?
W3, the Fuji.
W3.
And yes, it's the lenses are that far apart so that you can match the spacing for the human eye.
Exactly, because if you don't have that separation, at least for human scale subjects, then it becomes dramatically, I don't know, inconsequential. Like it doesn't make any impact. Why would you ever use this lens?
And when we've done ones where we use stereo video, which is a little different, where we exaggerate that. So if you're doing landscape photography, we've actually done ones where the cameras have been 20 feet apart to get the stereo, back out.
Stereo is awesome. Yeah. And so like there are devices too, like even on a single camera. This is from a company out of Iceland called Kula, and they made this thing called a Kula Deeper, which is it is a splitter. It will take your image right from the center and divide it further away using first surface mirrors. And it functions probably best around a 50 millimeter focal length with your existing equipment. And so there's been all sorts of upstarts, little sparks of ideas that kind of fizzle out and don't really come into anything. One of my favorites was a modification of that Lumix camera designed for the Red Epic. And it uses the exact same optics. They took it out of that lens and they turned it into an optic for the Red Epic that was designed specifically for macro work, because that interocular distance on a small macro scale works incredibly well. Sort of, the opposite of that hyper stereo, that hypo stereo on that small scale makes, I don't know. As a child, I was mesmerized by, cartoons like Fern Gully and whatever else. You've got this tiny, beautiful, magical world. And then as an adult, I discovered it's that cool when you see it in 3D. But to carry on with some of the ideas.
Well, and the Loreo, does Loreo still sell that little?
They did well. They might have new old stock. I believe if I can, where's my screen share to bring that Loreo one back up, because the idea, the concept between the super cheap ones like that Loreo 3D macro, that is plastic. Like I don't think that there's anything metal or glass in that entire device. So it is super cheap, and it's a great way to just start exploring these concepts. Or even that Panasonic Lumix lens that you can get for I don't know, under $100, I believe, on eBay. I can put little washers in between the lens mount and the lens itself on the lens, and that turns it into an extension tube that shifts it into a macro range. So this image was taken with that modification just by sticking washers into that, or dedicated 3D lenses that can capture two things instantaneously that need to be this is a freezing soap bubble sitting in a flower, and you have to do that at the same time. So some of the lenses, they do have those two optics at exactly the same place.
What do you think? What do you think is the highest quality, like Canon mount stereo lens?
That would be these DeWijs lenses from the Netherlands. DEWIJS is how that would be spelled. And, because it's two optics in the same barrel. But one of the challenges within this, and this is straight out of camera, and so this is another straight out of camera shot of some B-balm, which looks ugly in 2D, but looks like alien jaws reaching out at you in 3D. The thing about macro, at least on this smaller scale, is that depth of field becomes a problem. The closer you get, the shallower your depth of field becomes, and stereo is inherently needing depth, right? Because your eyes will jump around the frame quite a bit. And so this image was taken at f/80, and on a high resolution camera sensor, that diffraction is going to blur everything. And thankfully, if you see it in stereo, it kind of comes back together a little bit. You have sort of a double up of information, and you can run it through free software. Stereo Photo Maker is a very simple piece of software. Regardless of what you're doing, it's free, currently up to date. You can run it through some options to set your stereo window so you don't have any details off on either side that don't have a corresponding subject with one frame or the other. And this can be jarring, actually. If you have something that your left eye can see but your right eye can't, then it's this weird artifact. And it's not that difficult. You just basically hit some automatic buttons to correct all of this stuff, and now you're playing in the 3D world. It's really easy to experiment with. But To be honest, as we had kind of alluded to earlier on with a question, you can use the red hydrogen smartphone. And in fact, I've even like taped close-up filters onto it, good old gaffer's tape for just about any purpose. And that can become a beautiful stereo 3D, source for imagery.
Well, and one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking was the fact that the Ursa 12K has a really high resolution sensor that if you could theoretically get some very large stereo images out of.
Well, and that brings me to another point too, Alex, because when you look at an image like this, this was taken with a Leica Stemar, which is a circa 1954 era full frame stereo 3D lens. And that on its own, if I were to, I think I can grab it here. Yeah, that optic, it's kind of small, the same as the Panasonic Lumix one is, but it has with it a mirror attachment that would just plug onto the front of it that gives you that same interocular distance that you would expect from a regular stereo lens. I've got cameras now that shoot 6K, 8K, and as you mentioned, 12K, and it's becoming more and more standard. Just kind of cut 8K in half and you have a pretty decent, nearly 4K minus the corrections stereo image set that you can process in whatever professional software you use to possibly edit that. There's some great stuff out there. But for video content, using some of these lenses, this Leica lens, which is just a simple triplet lens, it's nothing fancy, but it's never designed to be shot wide open. It's designed to be stopped down, as most stereo stuff is, and so it's tack sharp on a lot of those cameras. That's the path forward, I think, is almost kind of a step back because the infrastructure is already there. It's just mostly forgotten. But that brings up the question as to why. Well, Stuart also has his hand up.
Good, Stuart.
Just quickly on that Leica lens you just held up, does that have any issues working on a sub full frame sensor? Because I know the Pentax one that I've got in the room behind me works on a 55mm lens, but only on a full frame size camera or a 135 format piece of film.
So yes and no, Stuart. It'll possibly physically couple. I had to modify the back of it. I had to 3D print a septum on the back of the lens to properly pair with my my Lumix L mount cameras, and using the Leica M to L mount adapter, it just kind of plugged in, and that was fine. Well, I shouldn't just gloss over the fact that I mangled my shutter and had to have that replaced because the septum was incorrectly engineered, and that's entirely my fault. And I had to go back to the drawing board and fix that.
Yep, your L series camera there is full frame, isn't it? I've tried my one on a KO one, which is APS-C, and it failed miserably.
Yes, because your stereo window becomes just this tiny narrow sliver, because if you have your sensor smaller, you're not getting the center of each image circle centered in the middle of every frame. If you're using an APS-C size sensor, then you're only getting the center part of it. So you're getting the right side of one and the left side of another, and there's almost no overlap between the two of them. So based on that, the lens has to be designed for a particular sensor size in mind. However, you can always go larger. So if I were to use the Stemar on a medium format camera, then I would just crop into the image circles from each eye and I'd be able to make that work, but you can't go the other way around.
So now you were getting to why.
Right. So 3D TVs, you can't buy one anymore. They don't exist. Well, I mean, they exist, but they're not something that is currently being pushed. But aside from, like, my daughter is upstairs in virtual kindergarten right now, and she is using a Loom Pad, which is produced by the company Leia that made the screen for the red hydrogen, and they've got a tablet that has glassless 3D technology, and there are other companies out there as well. Education is a great example, where that can really be immersive for people, but my daughter's kindergarten doesn't know a Loom Pad from an iPad. So that's not going to be, at least today, relevant. But I was thinking, if you're a professional image maker and you're photographing a wedding, you're doing a client shoot for any particular purpose, you can easily do a stereo 3D image set, right? And then you can provide your client with an antique stereoscope for like a line item budget, like it's double digit costs to really impress a client. If I was shooting a wedding, which I don't do much of, but whenever I attend a friend or family wedding, I shoot a 3D image of the bride and groom. And I present that to them as a stereo image with a viewer, and it sits in their entranceway, and they show it to every single person that walks into their house, right?
Yeah.
So from a marketing standpoint, there is some real value so long as you kind of embrace the niche of stereo and think, okay, well, nobody on their own volition in the general public is going to pursue this. Accept that fact and move past it, because then you have to say, well, can I another great example, the patents for the Viewmaster, they have expired. I mean, they still own the trademark for the name, so you have to say it's Viewmaster like or something akin to, but you can print your own Viewmaster reels and get 3D printed viewers and so on and so forth with your own brand on them for the 3D content that you may have created. So there's a lot of ways for you to generate this stuff. And I think, and I might be wrong.
Is there any digital Viewmaster? Like I like when the cardboard came out and it had the little magnet that all you had to do is move it up and down, my immediate like mind went to, it would be amazing if I could just put something on and just go like this and be able to share it, not have it be something that was relatively easy.
Well, and so I've got a bunch of these devices. Here's a Viewmaster on steroids from a company that, and Jason's got a Viewmaster there. There you go. That came with this camera. This is a beastly medium format 3D camera. Looks like something out of Splinter Cell when you look at the
Who makes that?
lenses. This was from a Chinese manufacturer called 3D World. They existed for like the year this was in production, and that's it.
What's the center camera for?
So the center one is the one that you look through. So you see through this one. This is kind of like a TLR, except the capturing lens is stereo.
Yeah.
And so that was a fun little device. It's got an exposure meter and everything, not autofocus, which none of these things have. But they made little holders where you would be able to put slide film into these little holders and then view that in this viewer, viewing the slide film directly. And it was otherworldly for about 2 decades ago. But nobody's been able to match that kind of resolution for a simple stereo viewer on a digital sense. They always kind of go back to analog, or they'll use your phone as the screen for it, like the cardboard.
Right. Let's go. Let's jump to the questions. If you have questions in the panel, go ahead and put them in the questions, because we got a lot of people asking questions now. Go ahead.
Okay, first one comes from Rubén Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Says, how do you get started with this type of photography, and where can you find the equipment?
eBay, type in 3D lens or stereo lens, and you'll probably find a whole bunch of old stuff. But I mean, even still, you can find a very inexpensive 3D cameras from the film era, 35 millimeter. A stereo Realist would probably run you $40. And is it convenient? No, you're shooting film, but it's cheap and it's easy to experiment with. And there's a lot of infrastructure, at least from the past, that people are just selling at yard sales for a couple of bucks. So if you want to get into that element of it, it's pretty easy to do. But if you want to adapt your digital world, then even with your smartphone, you can simply do the cha-cha method of just shifting your weight from one foot to the other and taking 2 separate images of a slight distance apart. The software can put those back together as a stereoscopic pair, so long as nothing has moved within the frame.
And what software again are you using for that?
Stereo Photo Maker. And that's free, still up to date. They just rolled out a 64-bit version for whatever that means for the kind of software it is. I'm not sure if that's required, but you've got that available for your explorations. And it's like, I hate when software has a lot of baggage, like Photoshop. As soon as like you go into the actions menu in Photoshop, it looks like you've gone back to the mid-90s in terms of how the UI operates. The software does the same. And so it's like walking into a cockpit of a large aircraft, and all you have to do is press 1 or 2 buttons to make it work. So don't feel intimidated by it. But the software is there and it's free.
And it works for Mac OS Sierra. So it might be a little, yeah, exactly. And I couldn't find the website of the company that you said should make more lenses. We're gonna do a little experiment here in a second. Everyone probably knows what's coming next. What's the URL?
DeWidge's 3D was the name of the company. So DEWIJS-3D.com.
DEWIJS-3D.com.
And they're from the Netherlands, and you won't find any real link to their 3D lenses except for maybe their 3D macro for the Red Epic that's still on their website. But they made them, and I want to convince them to make more.
I'm just trying to get to that website, and it says it can't be reached. Is anyone else finding it? If you do, put it in the in Makana. Oh, you guys, someone found it. Okay, no, the J I think was what I was missing there. Hold on. Do they have a contact us? They have a contact us.
They do.
All right.
And if you need help, I can give you a direct email address to the owner.
Well, this is so. And it's and this is they used to make one for the Canon.
Yeah, they made it for Canon Nikon mount. They made it in full frame and APS-C, which would please Stuart, that anybody using a smaller sensor. My idea for them would be to make one for mirrorless cameras, because it would be so much easier to design, because then you could have the septum running much further back towards where the film plane is, so long as you don't get too close to where your shutter is. I know that's a problem. And to make something possibly where you could have like the Kula deeper that separates things on one side, but also conversely to have one regular lens that could either go wider or an adapter that would make it go closer together for macro photography purposes. And I think that would just be as simple as putting a different adapter on the front of a well-designed lens to begin with, and you could have so much fun with this.
So for everyone in Mukana right now, my request is I just put in the direct link to the deep link to the contact. My request is that everyone in Mukana right now, or anyone watching, if you're watching this later, go to, well, we'll put it somewhere here. We'll see if Jeffrey can put it into the link, but go there and request say, I just said, I'd be really interested in one with a Canon mount. I want a Canon mount because I want to put it on Blackmagic cameras. And so just so you know, Don, we've done this once before. It gets a lot of attention when 100 people or 150 people all ask for the same thing at the same time. So we're counting on everybody here to push that down the pipe. I don't know if that'll be enough to warm them up a little bit, but we'll see if that goes anywhere.
Hey, we need a trumpet voluntary and assemble the brigade.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff has been crowdfunded in the past. And I know that there's a company on Kickstarter right now, or a project called Minuta Stereo, and they're doing an MDF stereo pinhole camera, medium format or 35 millimeter. And so that's the only way that a lot of these projects get off the ground, and they often fulfill the initial orders and then they disappear. Sort of like that 3D World medium format camera. You know, they
how much did you buy that for? How much did it cost?
I think I paid $800 for it. But it's the only one that's shown up on eBay in the last 6 or 7 years. So I'm sure that if I were to sell it to anybody that really truly wanted one, I could name my price.
Yep.
And that I don't think that should be the case. I think that this should be much more accessible, and that if anybody wanted to just experiment with this stuff, that the tools should be readily available without having to jump through hoops or do all sorts of digging on auction sites and so on.
Yeah. Next question.
Alex Forty Goldner here in the panel from London. It says, will stereoscopic 3D cameras be superseded by devices that capture light fields and point clouds? And if so, when?
Well, I mean, it's kind of two different things, because stereoscopic 3D is by its very nature like 2 points of view, and that's not to say that you only have to have two. There was the Nimslo camera that had 4 lenses. There's lots of different cameras that have multiple points of view. You could make cool lenticular prints and stuff out of. As soon as you get into light fields, point clouds, or even focus stacking on a very, very small microscopic scale, you can create 3D models of that data, and that photogrammetry and that data to create 3D content that can be moved around from multiple points of view. I think is different than stereoscopic 3D, and the two can kind of exist or coexist quite nicely. Will one supersede the other? Well, yeah, if you can see it from multiple points of view and you've got the technology to view it, then stereo alone kind of becomes old news. But it's been old news for 160 years and it's still semi-relevant today. So I don't think anything goes away.
Our experience with doing some tests in this area is that it's great when the geometry is pretty hard, but when you're talking about lighting effects and mist or anything else that is ephemeral, oftentimes plant life, so on and so forth, a lot of the things that Don, at least the stuff that sent me, would be very hard to do in photogrammetry. Like, it's not that it won't be impossible, but it'll take it'll take us a long time to get that realistic. Next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, how does this differentiate from VR 180?
So VR 180, assuming that that's stereo, so each eye has a different camera. That's still stereo. It's just allowing you to look around the scene to a greater degree than just a fixed perspective, and there's a lot of value for this. Especially I've done some work with documentary films where they've asked for the possibilities of this, not for the entire product, but for at least some little mini add-on to the end of it, a bonus thing that they could produce content in for people look, and it never turned into anything. But there are other markets for it, and it is just stereo 3D. When you apply video and you want to be immersive, it's just a VR version of video.
Yep. Next question.
Paul Wallace of Austin, Texas is next with discuss stereo photos of planet Earth from space.
This is actually ridiculously easy because you don't have to move the camera. You're the one that's moving. And I remember seeing, this is an old image, I think, while the Empire State Building was being built, and somebody took a photograph from one corner of the building looking out and then moved to the other corner of the building looking out over New York City, and it looked like a tiny little diorama, like Alex was saying, that the whole hyper stereo effect. Well, if the Earth is spinning and you take one image, and even if your camera's on a burst and you've got enough of a telephoto lens, there's enough of a spin of the Earth from one shot to the next to get a stereo pair. And you can even do the same thing by holding your camera up to an airplane window and taking a photograph out the window, especially if clouds are moving by. You will have a stereo 3D image pair, not because you yourself are physically moving the camera, but because there's motion in the scene that you're looking at.
When you do the stereo pairs, do you deal with convergence? Are you
this is tricky, and it's a good point, Alex, because the DeWius lenses that we were talking about, they converge as if you're looking at something close up and your eyes slightly cross, and then the background is divergent from that particular scene. And when those lenses were designed, they were in the 1990s, so people were shooting film and often at the smaller scale using flash, so the background would often be dark, and so that would not necessarily be a problem. Convergence for a lot of modern technology of 3D viewing with no glasses gives you artifacts in the background. I noticed when I was using my red hydrogen and the what's the app, not HoloPix, they now call it LeiaPix, but it's sort of a social media platform for sharing 3D content. Those images often failed if the background was too detailed because it just couldn't compute that. However, if you were to take that same image with a background convergence and throw it into a stereoscope, cross view it, or many other means of 3D that you have more mental control over, then the convergence is not an issue whatsoever. So it is a problem in some cases, and it's unfortunately more of a problem with modern technology than with the antiquities.
Interesting. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather here on the panel, Melbourne, Australia. Is the 1890 stereoscopic headset more comfortable on the face than many of the first-person view goggles for flying drones?
Well, you don't strap it to your face. You kind of lean into it, and you've got a little handle on it. The one that I have has a base, so it's like designed to sit on a table. So consider this the 1890s Virtual Boy, and ask yourself, was the Virtual Boy a comfortable device? Well, hunched over for hours on end looking through, it's probably not great either. So I'm not sure if that quite answers the question, but there's at least a modern comparison.
I love the idea of just an extra that you put into events, like that people would, get something that is, It's really, really cool. Yeah, next question.
Moving on, Paul Wallace is back with, can you discuss using a pocket stereoscope to view aerial photos? We did this in my aerial photo class at the U in the mid-1960s.
So that would have like usually the good ones, and those little pocket viewers had nice lenses on them. They'd fold up into your pocket. You could put them down on a piece of paper and look at what was effectively a stereo view, like those stereo cards. And so, yeah, that works. There's other fold-up devices too, and a lot of people don't realize that one of them, called the Owl, was designed by the lead guitarist of Queen, Dr. Brian May, who not only has a degree in astrophysics, PhD in astrophysics, but is also a stereoscopic 3D aficionado and loves the stuff, and has his own company in that space called the London Stereoscopic Society Foundation. I can't remember what the total name is, but I have some of his fold-up Owl viewers as well. I mean, they're cheap plastic lenses and a plastic fold-up little device, but they're fun to carry around if you're as dorky as I am.
There was one that there was a 3D company that was, that was handing these out, and they were like little viewers you could put in your pocket that would attach to your phone, and you could just put it up to your eyes, and it was super, but it wasn't even a cardboard. It was like literally just an open air, and I just can't think of the name of that one. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just following on from Paul's question there, I should point out that photos in the 60s might have been black and white, and they might have been from mosquito bombers, because stereoscopic photography at that time was used to judge the heights of things you were about to knock down.
Next question.
Paul Wallace is back from Austin. Is there such a thing as 3D Lidar?
Lidar inherently is 3D, and just by the very nature of it creating the field of information. Now, to have like two Lidar cameras pointing at the same thing to kind of see behind it and what have you, that might be a thing in a lab, but I don't think that it's practical.
Yeah, we don't need it. We don't need it. I mean, because we're getting the 3D points, and then we could reproduce some of the 3D. What's really cool actually is the reason I ran away for a second while Don was talking was I was trying to find my red blue glasses, because I have them usually sitting on my desk. I don't know where they might have moved off, because Metashape will actually view them as an anaglyph. So it'll go, you can hit a button in Metashape when you're doing photogrammetry, and it'll just pop it into red blue, and you can put it on, and it looks amazing. Like it's this really, really cool way to view your model. Next question.
Jason Bache here in the panel, Albuquerque. I was blown away by Peter Jackson's method of filming The Hobbit using dual cameras for true stereoscopic. Was the 48 frames per second standard intended to correct something which occurs when filming from two simultaneous cameras, or was it simply to assist in the complex motion sequences?
It's a great question that I don't have the answer to. Maybe somebody else does.
I don't think so. Next question. Sorry,
Jason. Yeah. Stuart is back from Melbourne with, what's the favorite software for compiling anaglyphs? Is there something better than Stereo Photo Maker or Stereo Movie Maker?
Anaglyphs are tricky because your glasses might have different slightly colored pigments from one set of glasses to another, and there's different color standards and so on and so forth. So in any program, there's different ways, or like if your image has a lot of red in it or a lot of blue in it, you might have to do a monochromatic anaglyph, or you might have to skew the colors before input. So any piece of software that has that ability to control and fine tune it, I think is ideal. I mentioned Stereo Photo Maker because it's free and easy for everybody, but Stuart's got his hand up. He might have another idea.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I was just going to point out that the 64-bit version of Stereo Photo Maker you said about before, you need to run as admin when you try and install it, because I've just done it. And the Stereo Movie Maker, I think you'll find, is a skin on Virtual Dub. So I'm not sure how up to date that would be, but that's the same two tools that I use most of the time.
For some reason, I thought that there used to be there was a Photoshop plugins that did it, that would take two layers and do that, I thought, or some kind of Photoshop. There was
also a version of Edius that had 3D editing with a dual timeline. I think it was about version 8 or so.
Yeah. Next question.
Moving on, this time we go to JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, and JJ asked, how well do these models work with SeeFront eye tracking displays out of Germany? They've been developing and licensing their tech for about 15 years.
I haven't played with this technology. Eye tracking displays have always been interesting. You know, eye tracking for displaying different content or even focusing on different things. I think that, you know, 15 years ago, that was that the timeline, or I guess probably earlier than that, where Canon was experimenting with eye tracking for focus in their cameras. And I don't know how well that's evolved for displaying 3D content and depth. Has anybody experienced these displays?
I have not.
No.
Yeah. The only
now I want to.
Yeah. I think the only ones that I've actually done with, you know, without glasses has been the hydrogen, which is pretty slick. The hydrogen, the things you want to see are things close up and a lot of things in depth. Like I shot snow on the hydrogen, like snow falling, like heavy snow. It's cool. You know, like that kind of thing looks
because
amazing.
it's got the depth to it, and it kind of jumps out at you. And the same thing is true of the Loom Pad, the spiritual successor in a larger format. But I find with that device, I have to be holding it at complete arm's length away before the 3D effect really kind of condenses well in my brain. If I'm viewing it too close together, then it's too hard on my eyes and my you know, my cognition to put it together. And that, I think, is a fault in the device. But that device on its own, and I actually did an interview with the one of the co-founders of that company on a podcast that I do called Inside the Lens, and he talks all about the technology and how, you know, he started doing, you know, quantum computer work for HP, and then evolved into his own company, and how there's some really cool tech behind it. But I think that it's still 2 generations away from the average person saying, "Okay, this is great. I want this in my pocket."
Well, and a lot of times I think in some ways it is it's just the right content coming up. You know, like for instance, if Taylor Swift decided she was going to do a bunch of 3D pictures or whatever, sell like 20 million, you suddenly have, you know, just the right person thinking that this is cool enough that they would do it.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Brian May, for all of his fame, is kind of hitting the wrong demographic, and he's no Taylor Swift in terms of the social media following. But at the same time, once you can create the stereo 3D content, throw it in front of somebody that can promote it, I think we're just waiting for whomever that catalyst is going to be. Right. And it can happen today. It can happen 10 years from now. We just need that one sort of sense of, I don't know, a popularity. Like everybody needs to have it because it's a fashion thing now. And I don't know if we're going to get there. It's total, like, will something go viral? You just don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, here on the panel. Is there a limit to the size that a lenticular screen can be built to, such as the screen the Fuji cameras and the 3D console use?
Yeah, the Nintendo, the 3DS used a lenticular type display, I believe, and so the Fuji cameras, you know, yes and no. I mean, I've seen giant billboards that are lenticular displays, so they can be massive, but you're intending to view them from an incredible distance away. The field of view within your vision is the key, and there's a limit to that.
And what I will say is that one of the things that I find fascinating about when you, and I've been in the stereo. I mean, I've had the W1, the W3. I've shot a lot of stereo for work, and in video and stills, and the thing that most of my work has been some kind of 180, 360, whatever. The fact that your work was macro and it's just this little box of this little tiny area, and it's just this incredibly rich 3D, I think is something that just opened up my mind into something a lot, because it has that kind of artsy, you know, because you're filtering it, you know, it's not just the photograph, right?
Well, and case in point, Alex, if you take a look at this image here, I'll move the chat out of the way, but this image is a praying mantis nymph walking across flower petals with water droplets on them, refracting an image of a flower that is placed in the background. And viewing this in 3D, the number of layers that you can see is immense, from the ripples in the water to the refractions in the water droplet to the refractions in the reflection in the water droplet to the background and so on. That the level of depth that one can create when you're manipulating a scene like this is huge. And sometimes it's an orchestrated scene, sometimes it's just, okay, well, here's a medlar flower from my garden, and that's fluorescing in ultraviolet because it makes it look alien and otherworldly and something that should belong in an upcoming version of Avatar, maybe. This kind of 3D constructed content was really fascinating to me, because you're sculpting something, you're creating something in 2D, and this is invisible ink mixed into bubble fluid to make a freezing soap bubble that's freezing solid outside in the wintertime, with highlighter ink in the background to make things glow orange, because why not? Just to make something fantasy-like, right? That is somewhat grounded in reality, in the fact that I'm capturing it with optics and a lens. But the creative juices really get flowing when you can start creating some of this content. And it's not just from this area. Like, you've seen some 3D works, and I've played around with these guys. This is a cicada, ugly bug. I can make it glow under ultraviolet fluorescence, which made him look like this. And then I was working on a documentary film for Discovery, and the film was called Mosquito. And I thought, okay, well, let's try to shoot a mosquito in stereoscopic 3D. There's one, and then there's the double set. And I showed that to the director of that film, and they loved it so much. They didn't use any stereo work, but they got me to shoot a whole bunch of ultraviolet fluorescing mosquito footage that ended up being the title sequence for the documentary film, at the time when they were doing pickup work, right? Like they were pretty much done everything. And so that really impressed the person to explore the depth of it. But sometimes it's even like video work. Like if I've got this, fluorescing stuff on a flower, but that's not just a still, that's shot on a rotational platform as video. This can be easily turned into stereoscopic 3D content. It's photogrammetry in essence. When you start to spin things around, you see it from all angles, and you've got that. So you can create stereo 3D video just by rotating stuff, and it's just on a simple rotating platform like that. Or as I mentioned, I've photographed some things as tiny gets. This is a micrometeorite that measures 1/4 of a millimeter across. And this is a focus stack of 300 or 400 different frames. And the information gathered from that, even from a single perspective, can create a stereoscopic image of this. I haven't gone back to make a stereo version of that one. But Alex, you'd mentioned sort of the disparity of convergence. This image doesn't work well on a hydrogen because the lens that I was using, it looks great if you're viewing it on antiquities, but it doesn't connect together very, very well on modern displays because the background, it just doesn't know how to handle it, trying to display that at the same time as the foreground. Whereas if you have something more like this, where the background isn't so detailed and so deep, then it works on almost every device, no matter how you're viewing it. And so understanding the compositional elements, how things come to the forward and the back, how freezing a soap bubble on an orchid has dimensionality and a 3D play that works great in 3D. That's wonderful. And then we play into the idea of these stereo cards, which is not a new idea. I mean, Alex, you've got a couple of them that I sent you.
Yep, they're amazing.
And they're fun, and they're age old. I've got a whole bunch of antiquated ones, but I made my own that actually won a design award. I just hammered in some corners that are designed to be put in the corners of notebooks to stop them from fraying. Had some custom embossed mats that I made up and printed things out, and away you go into those antique stereoscopes. And that alone, as Alex, you said, an add-on to an existing job, to present something like this to a client that they didn't ask for, they didn't know you were going to make, and that you just give this to them. Or maybe, like I mentioned,
I can tell you the reason I'm so interested is from a personal perspective, I am the worst person to buy a gift for. Because I am like when people send me gifts, I'm like, whoa, that's going to be scary, because I'm super specific. I don't have a really expensive taste, but I have almost everything that I want. like I don't have that many new things that I don't need new things, and I'm particular about space. Like, oh, I don't have anywhere to put it, And so Don, who we've met a couple times, but sends me this box, and I'm like, why is he sending me a box? Like I was like, and when I opened it up, it is one of the few things that always is sitting on my desk, and every person that walks into my I showed it to my kids, my wife, and every person that walks into my office, not many now, but when I get the opportunity, I'm like, oh, you got to see this. Like, this is really cool. And so and I love the fact that it's old. It's this very old thing, very old idea that jumps out at me all the time.
It brings new life when it's new content being viewed in it as well.
Yeah.
And you could do some of the latest 3D models printed in stereo and throw that in there in a viewer that's over 100 years old. And that just the juxtaposition of technology and eras, I think, is a lot of fun. I've got so many ideas I'd love to explore in 3D that I haven't yet. I started a fire in the center of a flower using hexamine powder. That's the same stuff that you use in like those solid fuel camping tablets that, to boil water and what have you. And I sprinkled some copper in to make the fire green while I'm burning in the center of a thistle. How cool would this look, especially with the sparks and embers flying in 3D? I haven't gotten there yet. Or maybe this spider on a flower dancing about. There's so many cool things that you can explore in 3D, not just in stills, but this would be so cool in video. And the tech is not hard to do, as we've discussed.
Well, and the thing is that in the TikTok world, it doesn't have to be like, people always go, well, I don't want to watch a whole game in stereo. Okay, that's fine. But what if you just want to experience a moment in stereo? Like, that's the thing that
and say, experience that moment in 3D. Okay, that moment was great. Let's just go back to the way it was, right? To have the ubiquitousness.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question
comes from James Babbitt in San Diego. What supplier would you use for stereo Realist metal mounts and mounting supplies?
So Stereo Realist, I'll stop my screen share. I was going to talk about the book that I have that has some 3D stuff in it, but so the idea of 3D and of that kind of content is there is one company out of Toronto, I can't remember the name of them. I've actually had them do some lenticular prints for me. And they do all sorts of 3D stuff, but I don't even know if they're still in business anymore, because when I went to them, their website hadn't been updated in a decade. And they did answer their emails, but not their phones. So your mileage may vary. It's going to be a Google search, and you're going to maybe send out a couple of feelers and come back with maybe one person somewhere in rural Nebraska that is still doing it. It's going to be a destination type of service. It's not something you'll find in every city.
Next question.
Was one of mine, and I just asked, I was curious as whether there was a general standard for interocular distance when you're deciding how far apart to put two lenses. And I probably should just ask an optician who probably has lots of data on that.
Well, I mean, people have different spacing between their eyes, and good VR headsets can actually adjust for that as well. But, Stuart might have the answer. His hand's up.
Go, Stuart.
On average, 7 centimeters.
There you go.
Next question.
Ken Jordan of Epsom in the UK. What lighting setup do you use for your 3D stereoscopic photography?
This might come as a bit of a surprise, but I often use a ring flash, sometimes on camera, but oftentimes held off on the side, because it creates a fairly diffuse light that's not going to give a lot of flare coming across one lens or another, which can be problematic. But it also creates a fairly full light for the space around the subject. Now, this only applies to a macro scale. Now, if you're doing stereo on a much larger scale, you'll have to use vastly different techniques. But a ring flash mounted off camera, off on one side or the other, gives enough depth and dimension. And so long as it's using xenon flash tubes in the ring flash, not LEDs, because the flash duration is much, much faster with actual flash tubes than with LED lighting. You don't want to have motion blur, because that can be nauseating in 3D. Yeah, ring flash. That's the ticket.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood. How do you rate the post-conversion of flat photographed movies for 3D release compared to films actually shot with stereo pair cameras?
gimmicky at best, nauseating at worst, and I'm sure I'm going to annoy anybody that's actually worked very carefully to make this function. But
I think we all know.
It's always felt forced.
I got brought in when they were trying to get it launched. Sony had a bunch of invitationals, so you go down to the Sony lot, and they had a 2-day course on stereo video. I mean, video, like shooting with stereo, and I suddenly realized how good stereo could look. Like, because it was real cameras shooting through a beam splitter with control over interocular, convergence, everything all in one little pressed in control. And when you saw it, you were like, this is the future. And you got so excited. And then you watch the movies, and even ones that were shot in 3D, a lot of times so much post-process was done that when you moved away from the raw footage, it immediately felt the magic was lost. But true stereo coming out of two cameras. Wow. Stereo Stuart.
Yeah, you don't want two of me. One of me's bad enough. Just for Courtney, yeah, incoming rant, mate. You should never, ever, 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 ever do 3D conversions. It looks like crap. I'm just going to be blunt. Shoot it with two cameras. Yeah. It's not that hard to do, and all you've really got to do is sync the cameras. But as for getting your Z-axis right, I probably shouldn't pull back the curtain where my 3D rig is and where the experiments are. Oops.
Well, Stuart, I will state that, if you have a Lidar sensor like on the latest iPhones and you're doing a still and you're trying to convert something like that into a stereoscopic 3D still, there's merit to that conversion once you have the additional aids of not just a single two-dimensional image. But if there's no aids, if there's no additives, and if you're trying to do video, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Next question
comes from Alex Gollner again in London. This time, the turn of the 20th century stereo images you showed were of human scale spaces, botanical gardens, stalls, and so forth. What interocular distance was probably used to take those particular images?
That was probably taken with a camera very similar to this guy right here. This is a Realist, which this one is circa 1926, I think. And so that would be, again, about that same 7 centimeters interocular distance that human beings have for their eyes.
Fascinating. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, are you leveraging the fact that the center of the eye sees more detail than the edges? And are you wanting us to look around the image, thus keeping more items in focus?
Yes. In a word, but the idea of stereo is that you're not looking at a singular anchor point. It's guiding your eye through the frame. If you're looking in terms of 2D composition, you might have a diagonal line in the corner of a frame that goes into a spiral because that will lead into an anchor point and maybe negative space and so on and so forth. Throw those rules out. They no longer apply when you're adding in the third dimension and that Z-axis space. Anything that's drawing your eye in the frame doesn't have to connect to the edge of the frame. In fact, it might be better that it doesn't, because that can create some artifacts where it's viewable on one eye and not the other.
Yeah. And so you have a book coming out soon.
I do. And so one of the reasons why I did want to mention it, Alex, was partly because it's going to be it's going to have some stereo 3D content in it. So that was going to be the last slide that I was going to share, is that this book has an entire chapter that I put into anaglyph in the back about how you can shoot with stereo 3D. And it is going to be hitting the press very, very soon. But if you're at all curious about macro photography and all the ins and outs, whether it's 2D or 3D, you can take a look at that, piggybacking off of my first book on snowflakes, which is where that domain name might be quizzical to some. But that will be shipping very soon. And if anybody wants a copy of the ebook version before it's officially released, I'd be happy to send it to you, because I just finished that up yesterday.
Like I said, yeah.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So.
Yes, please.
Yeah. We'll ping you. Let's figure that out. Yeah. I'd love to see it. Yeah. I love macro photography, and this is even one step over. So I really wanted to pick your brain about this. I'm really glad you came and hung out with us a little bit. Last question. I think we got one more question in time for it.
Yeah, we had a late arrival from Stuart. Will changing the Z depth convergence during a scene cause nausea?
I'm going to say yes, although I haven't tried that. Whenever you start messing with your perceptions in 3D, it just messes with the way you see the world, and your brain doesn't compute it right. Alex, what happened for you?
Well, so when it's really off, it bothers you a little bit. But the fun one to do to somebody when they've got goggles on is do it slowly. It's like boiling a frog. You basically, if you move the convergence very slowly, their eyes will just keep following it until it hurts. Like it's like it was actually when we were working on this, it was actually one of the things that you would do to somebody when they put the goggles on was move the convergence really slowly along as they're watching something. You're just slowly moving it, and their eyes will just slowly cross. And so because they'll keep tracking it, and the brain will keep on working it until suddenly they realize their eyes hurt a lot, and then they look away and they have to take it off. And you only do it once. It's not fun to do more than one time. It'd probably hurt them. Anyway, you definitely can. Your eyes will keep on adjusting, and the problem you really get into when we got into 3D production was actually cutting to do two different convergences is actually really hard. So you can't cut as fast in a 3D film as that's part of why converting films didn't work as well. Is because you actually want to watch the shot longer in 3D. Fast action cuts means that you're changing oftentimes the interocular and convergence all at the same time, and your brain doesn't do that every day, and so it's really uncomfortable. It makes it uncomfortable to watch. You have to pay a lot of attention to that. Sky and then Stuart, real quick, we're gonna.
Don, I just want to say thank you. Your imagination is exemplary, because you have gone into something that we will step on and not even think about looking at, and you've explored the macular into the almost neutron level. I don't know, but it just you stirred the imagination with tools and technology, but visually your is stunning. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Stuart.
That's cruel what you were doing before. And sorry, Mickey. Yes, I realized I opened my mic without realizing it. But changing the Z depth is something the Cameron Pace rig and most beam splitters can't do. It actually needs two separate cameras sitting side by side to do it. So it's a little odd. And I would like to second what Sky just said. Thank you for coming in, Don. It's been amazing to listen to.
My pleasure. And thanks to Alex for having me.
Oh, it just took us a little time to get you on, and just between all of our schedules and back and forth. And I know you're really busy, so thank you so much. And let us get a link where people can buy the book. Send it to me, and I'll make sure it goes out in distribution. We send out a link to your website, but I want to make sure everyone knows where to get it because it looks amazing. Perfect. So anyway, thank you so much for coming by. And thanks to the panel for a great first hour as well as second hour, and thanks to the Alex Kollner. Thanks to it's a look. I think it's got some future. Also, thanks to the audience for a lot of great questions, keeping driving that conversation forward. We can jump into the post show. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. All right. Tonight is the evening show. So we'll see you tonight. All right. Thanks again, Don.